Welcome back to the Badger Den Strength Cast, working title. I'm Sean.
And I'm Sailor. And today we're going to talk a bit about just general mistakes that we see, and that's going to bleed into a few different conversations about sort of mentality in training and just out of training, really, all around. So strap in.
It's going to be cool.
Right?
Well,
every week.
We're interesting.
Sometimes. I can be.
We're interesting when we're not rigid.
I have an opinion about everything. I cannot guarantee that opinion is good or correct.
Or educated.
Or educated. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. But I'm going to feel strongly about it no matter what. And that's what I bring to the table.
Right on.
All right. So, just questions. This is nothing super serious, but I thought about this today, and I have my answers. And I want to ask you, because you've been in the game a lot more. You've observed people a lot more, and you've seen a ton more people. So, sort of like a three-prong question, right? So, what are the most common mistakes that you see lifters doing? And three answers, right? One, in the gym. Like in Badger Den, at the gyms you used to lift at, as just like an observer of other random people lifting, and that you tend to do. And when I say mistakes, it doesn't have to be like the first two can be like chronic, obvious mistakes, but what are like the same sorts of traps or like movement pitfalls that you tend to find yourself falling into? And then I have answers for all of these that I'll answer.
Okay, so starting with what we see in our gym, or what I see, rather. I would say, like, and I guess maybe it's wrong to say this is just our gym, but, like, I think basically anybody, one of the big pitfalls you can fall into early on is, like, being too worried about perfect. Because there is this, like, range of what's acceptable, right? And when people get too caught up in being perfect, it's like going back to that paralysis by analysis idea. Like, they're not willing to make mistakes that would accelerate how quickly they can actually learn the movement, right? Like, making mistakes, making errors is, like, just foundationally one of the biggest things for motor learning, and, like, how the cerebellum actually collects information and figures out, like, how to make a proper movement pattern. So if you're never actually, like, allowing yourself to make mistakes and, like, explore movement and, like, feel what it is to do it just, like, a little bit wrong, it's always not going to be – it's never going to be honed in, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe you've found this technique that you think is perfect, but it's the only thing you've ever done. And it kind of jams your hip a little bit, but, like, it gets you through the squat and you do just fine, and, like, you get parallel, and it's like – it's not that bad a pain either, right? It's probably okay. I'm sure everybody squats like that, right? Everybody just has a little bit of pain, and, maybe I can't hold my positions as well as I'd like, especially under heavy loads, but, like, this is what I think perfect looks like. But then, like, maybe if they would have actually just played with the movement more and, like, especially taking advantage of warm-ups and tried different foot positions, tried different knee positions, tried to externally or internally rotate at the hip, or try different bar positions, all these little things that you can just, like, you just have all these opportunities to actually try something different.
Yeah.
When they miss that, they don't ever, like, really get to feel what it's like to have a perfect squat for their body, right? Because every body is different.
Yeah.
Everyone's got different leverages. Everyone's got different hip socket shapes versus torso length versus femur length, right? And, a coach, myself included, can only just, like, teach you the shapes of what it looks like to be in a correct exercise, but you actually have to put in the work of, like, feeling what it's like to have perfect exercise, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like learning how to live in your own body type thing, or, like, experiencing your own body. And it's, like, one of those things that has, like, compounding effects. Like, I found that, like, when it's easier for me to pick up exercises because I've done it for long enough that I have a decent idea of, like, what it feels like to be in my own skin. And so I can, like, watch somebody do a movement, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think I'm pretty good at, like, emulation by sight. Like, I see somebody do something and I'm like, I can do that, and I like can approximate the movement, or even just read it and do something that probably is incorrect, but is doing something like the knee circles. I remember we were doing for a while. Like the first day I showed up, the video wasn't working, and I was like coaching, and so it wasn't like on the floor. It was like these like weird knee circle
Yeah,
things.
you're standing up with your knees bent and your hips bent, putting your hands on your knees
and doing little circles.
Which, to be fair, we did that shit in college.
Yeah.
That was part of Greg Everett's warm-up, and he's still, like, big name in weightlifting.
Yeah. I don't think it was bad. I just think it was, like, funny. It just
intention.
wasn't the intended workout.
That's part of the problem with, just, like, exercises in general. Is like, there's so many fucking... Like, there's literally an infinite number of exercises.
Yeah.
And nobody has the same name for anything.
True.
Right. So
well, and everybody tries to come up with some like the like original names. I feel like there's this like big race to like trademark movements. Like I wonder. Sometimes I think that people do alternate movements just for the purpose of trademarking the name of the movement that's slightly different, even if it's like a worse movement overall, but maybe it's better for like their body type, like the Gilbert thruster.
which is
a thruster from the barbell on your back. So you do a back squat into essentially like a weird Klokov press, like from your back.
Man, you threw me off with that. I had something to say. Oh, so I think it's hard too, because I feel like if it's a named exercise, other people gotta name it for you. You can't name it yourself. You can't be like, I invented this thing and I'm gonna name it after me and I want everybody to do it. It's like, the Kroc row is the Kroc row because it's just the row that Matt Kroc or Janae Kroc Janae Kroc did to build the back that she had back then, right? And Dorian Yates, right? The Yates row, it's named after him because that's how he liked to do his rows. It was just a fucking barbell row to him, right? But then they named it the Yates row because he built his back with that row. Same with the Meadows row. I mean, maybe Meadows named it himself and whatever, but like still, he's got had one of the best backs, right?
Yeah, I think it's funny too how sometimes names can mislead. Like the Romanian deadlift. I watched a video on YouTube on some channel. I don't remember what it is, but it was basically somebody talking about how weird it is that like the differences between the stiff-legged deadlift and the Romanian deadlift are negligible, but for some reason, the Romanian deadlift is like crazy popularized as a name, even though they mimic the movement potentially from somewhere else, and then they just popularized it, and then suddenly they're almost getting credit for it. Not that it should be a credit thing, but it's in just your thought processes.
Yeah, I mean, like the Bulgarian split squat. I mean, there's so many different little things like that. I think with the Romanian deadlift, I think what it was, from my understanding, is that like the Romanian team, the weightlifting team, used those a lot in their training. And they're like, oh shit, they did really well at the Olympics. What they're deadlifting like that? Oh, that's how the Romanians deadlift? Okay, let's call it a Romanian deadlift. I'm like fairly certain that's how it happened.
It couldn't possibly be any other reason why in that particular Olympics the Romanians did super well. As an entire group.
No, I mean, that's not like the story, right? That's just like a paraphrase of like potentially how it exactly happened.
Well, I mean, I'm sure at the time everybody was kind of like, whoa, their training is so revolutionary.
Well, and I don't think it was unique to them at that time either. I think it was like a movement that people did. It's just like everybody saw them doing it a lot and was like, bam, that's what I associate it with.
To kind of circle back, I took it like a bit more literal as like mistakes go, but I really liked your answer about chasing perfect technique. It kind of relates back to what we talked about. Yeah, we've talked about it.
I've already hit
and
that
like chasing the dragon and stuff. It actually changed my answer for like the thing that like I do wrong. So I'm gonna the thing that I see people do the most common is back squat in their toes.
Oh yeah.
at the gym. Like the core movement thing that I see tends to be the thing that a ton of people struggle with, is just being really front
Yeah.
for like facing and front leaning in the back squat.
Yeah, that's definitely a plague to like almost every fucking beginner, especially if they've done like any amount of cardio, like running at least,
Yeah.
in the past, because it's just everything you do is forward. Everything you do is on the front of your body. I mean, it shouldn't really be that way if you're like really good at running and you've cross-trained and you're like balanced out and everything like that, right? But that's how like the majority of casual runners run. It's very much just like with all the muscles on the front of their body.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't really have to think about I don't know if this is true, but it almost feels like with like the modern shoe shape. I know that's like a big thing where you're running with the shoes, heavy toe lift and a high heel, kind of atrophies the calf. You don't really have to think about foot movement and having like strong, just lower legs, both like, I don't even remember what the muscle is, like the front, the tibia portion.
Tibialis anterior.
There we go. I was almost there. I would have got it eventually. And the calf, just like strengthening both of those muscles through running in something like a minimalistic shoe or even, like a traditional running style. I wonder how much of that plays into why runners, like casual runners, struggle with being super toe heavy in their movements.
That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
In terms of whether it's footwear or not. Because, if you were running barefoot, you wouldn't be able to heel strike. You'd fuck yourself up heel striking.
Yeah. So you'd almost have to be toed up for running when you're running barefoot.
Yeah,
I've been there
with
like the zero shoes, just running. It's like you have to change how you run and walk in minimalistic shoes. Like it messes you up.
Because you can't just jam your fucking heel into the floor over and over again.
Yeah,
it doesn't work that way
it doesn't
anymore.
feel good. So it almost feels like if you were doing minimalistic running, you would be more toe heavy. But
potentially.
I almost wonder if it's sort of like a counterintuitive sort of thing. Like you're just more aware of how your foot is.
Yes, I think that's true. I think also when you're wearing like the typical running shoe, like the big fucking boot Hoka bullshit.
Yeah.
That's not only are you heel striking, just like your stride is overall longer, so that you push off the toes longer.
Yeah.
Versus like you're when you're minimalist training, you're going to more intuitively like pull the foot up, right? Versus let it trail and push off of the toe longer.
Yeah.
For what that's worth.
Yeah. It's all connected. Marketing, capitalism. It's always at fault. If you don't know, that Nike is one of the main reasons that the shoes are the way they are and why people walk and run the way they walk and run.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised.
Is a marketing campaign to get people to buy shoes with high heels.
Yeah, I mean, and then, I'm thinking of the New Balance Monarchs. They can sell the 40-year-old white men because they're so squishy.
It's great. I think that's a huge thing, too, that I stayed away from is because just this idea of everybody just wants to add more mushy shit under your feet when you're standing.
You need to be comfortable.
And when it's like you're on concrete all day. Here's your 3-inch shoes and a 3-inch rubber pad. And if it gets too bad, you can double stack them. And then it's like, my back hurts. And it's like, you are standing on sand for 9 hours a day. Worse than sand. There's no support there. You're better off just being barefoot and just using the natural, just stand.
But it's hard.
But it's so hard. The concrete is hard, so it's good to stand on soft things.
No, and I mean, I think like a lot of that's education, right? And because there's no education, marketing is what fills that void.
Yeah.
Right. But also like it does hurt. It does like if you go from a sedentary lifestyle and then you have to be on your feet 8 hours a fucking day at a job or whatever, and you're not wearing a squishy ass shoe. Your dog's gonna be killing
sucks. You. Yeah, dogs are barking. Yeah, it's not good. It doesn't feel good. But it's like, I think that so much of it is just a little bit of pain now.
Yeah.
For a lot less pain overall.
Yeah, I mean that's the fucking gym in general. Right?
Yeah, right. Just trying to pay it forward,
Everyone wants to tell me I'm a sadist all the time, and like I gotta be a little bit of a sadist, but it's all for the grand scheme, right? Makes everything else easier.
And plus, it makes you feel good when you go to the gym and you're training strength, and every once in a while, every once in a blue moon, the planets align, and you get to pick some heavy shit up somewhere where other people can't pick heavy stuff up. Where it's like, oh, we need to move this thing, and it's like, oh, I've got it, and then you feel really cool, and everybody's like, wow, he's really strong. Feels good. That's what I do.
I did that at a wedding once.
I had my kind of fit, kind of fat shirt on, and which I love that shirt, and I moved like a tree up north, like a big tree that had been like in the same spot. And I will say that I went and started with like basically like a oh my god, I'm totally blanking.
Like a sumo deadlift?
Like a sumo deadlift. And it was heavy. And I was going to like stop, but I was like, I can't not lift this.
Mama's watching me.
So I just powered through, and I got it up. And then once I got it up enough to kind of like shimmy my hips under it and kind of drive it up, and then I was able to like flip it over into like the side of the cabin, like in that little strip of trees, and it was just like just felt like so powerful. And yeah. And my dad was like, I like your shirt makes sense now. And I was like, thanks.
What do you think? It just was supposed to say kind of fat before?
I guess. I think that I had told you this story before, and you had made the comment. You were like, yeah, it's like people think that we just go to the gym for fun. and it's like so true. It's like I like tell people, and they're like, oh, I really give it to you. You've been going like for quite a while. You've kept up with this thing. And it's like, yeah, it's fun. There are parts of it that are fun. But it's not like what I would necessarily choose to do given the an infinite number of like options. I will say that if I was super rich, and I didn't have to work, I would 100% work out every day. I like it. It would be one of those things that it would be easy at that point. But it's with like daily pressures and things to do, it feels like it's not. I at this point, I'm mostly doing it because I like the socialization. I like feeling strong, and I like the idea of being older and not being like decrepit.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think like there's also this, like most people don't understand the difference between exercise and training, right?
Yeah.
And like what we're doing is training. What we do has a purpose, like an end goal, right? And most people just exercise, and then they're just like, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with exercising. It's great. You need physical activity. Go do whatever you like to do, right? It's not to say that one's better than another. They're just different, right?
Yeah.
And training fills that exercise bucket, but like exercise isn't necessarily training, right? It's like squares and rectangles.
Yeah.
Right? All squares are rectangles. No, shit. What is it? Yeah, it's all squares or rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's exercise and training, right?
Yeah.
And like you just going and having fun and playing squash or whatever, I don't know, pickleball. Like that's cool. That's exercise. Mm-hmm. But like once you're so deep into training, like it's just like you understand the process. It's the process, right?
Yep.
You go and you put in your day, and you put in your day, and you put in your day, and eventually you just reap all that rich, juicy reward at the end.
And it's so sneaky,
or you shit the bed and you fuck up your bone rep max.
Which happens more often than not. But it's so sneaky too, though, because it's like one of those things where it's like you do it. Oh, shit, what is it? I had a great thing that was at the tip of my tongue, and then as I started saying it, I realized I was going to say it wrong. It's sort of the thing that you seek it because you feel like you need it, and then when you get it, you realize you don't need it type thing. It was like the journey.
Oh yeah,
was what was valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I feel like that's what like the goals at the end of all these training cycles, because once you get to enough of those end goals, you realize that there's just another one.
Yeah,
after it.
Yeah,
and it truly is like the Sisyphean journey, and you just have to find enjoyment in the training.
Yeah,
and you'll get there. Like we talked last time about how it doesn't get easier, but you get better.
Yeah.
And like I did pause squats at 315 on Monday. 315 used to be my 1 rep max.
I mean, shit, 135 used to be when your 1 rep
Well, it used to be
right?
my 1 rep max. Yeah, I fell backwards with 135. Like, it's happened. It's you are improving. It's just sometimes it's easy to forget because of the environment you put yourself in and the fact that you're progressively overloading, so you're always pushing that boundary. And so when you finish, it never feels like you're getting better, but you are.
Yeah. Well, it's because, you're just always seeing that one step, that one little increment, and never like there's not this stark contrast necessarily, right? Of like where you were when you started and then like what you could do.
Yeah.
Because you go in and you do it every day, right?
Yeah. All right. I'm going to start this next one. The mistake that you saw a lot of people doing at other gyms. Mine's really fast, really simple. People bouncing deadlifts.
Well, that's the way they do it in CrossFit.
Yeah.
Not saying that's right.
Yeah, it's just it's somebody's like, I could do 10 reps at insert X weight, and then you watch it and you're doing half reps, if even. You're just like using the bumper plates to like bound it back up to where you want it to be.
Yeah, I've had so many people come from CrossFit into our gym and like want to deadlift that way. I'm like, dude, please stop. Deadlift, dead stop. Every time.
It's not. It must just be like the culture of CrossFit in like the speed and
because it's a competition, right? And it's not really about like functionally what you're capable of. It's what score you can put on the board, right?
Yeah, true.
And that's what matters.
And they're not tracking in CrossFit. You tend to not. I did CrossFit for a period of time. We both came in starting with CrossFit, and then we did CrossFit football for a long time, which evolved into something power athlete. And I liked that, and that has honestly morphed into something very similar to what that style of strength portion into WOD sort of
that's very influential
framework.
In our style.
Super influential, and I enjoyed that, but that is very different from like. And I started doing some CrossFit for a period of time in Oshkosh, expecting that. And it wasn't that. There isn't a consistency.
No.
The only consistency is that every training session is hard as fuck.
Yeah.
But you're not doing the same lifts week to week. It's just always different, and it's always designed to make you like hyper exhausted. And it's like they've kind of sold this idea of like the functional fitness and that like the grind, like you're getting better because it's hard, which is it says something. You're getting better at work capacity. You're getting better at a lot of things. It's just
you could even get more muscular doing that.
Yeah, it's just like you can't say that you can't because there's like some monster people doing CrossFit out there, although I imagine they've got something else going on the side too. And that's not alluding to PEDs like I tend to do whenever I say that. I mean, I have a feeling that a lot of them do more consistent training on progressive overloading, specific lifts on the side, and that the CrossFit style workouts tend to be more along the line of WODs or for the purpose of training work capacity. I imagine if you really deep dove into like a professional CrossFitter's like training, it wouldn't necessarily look like what the training looked like for like
CrossFit Oshkosh.
Yeah, for like
not to name drop.
Yeah, for like Brandy going in and doing CrossFit in her local CrossFit gym.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is coming back to that idea of like exercise versus training, right?
Yeah.
And because there is no consistency in CrossFit, because essentially you're just buying the name when you are a CrossFit, some places have good training at a CrossFit. But then CrossFits like the ones you're describing are just like exercise for the sake of exercise, right? It's not an actual training program, even if like maybe someone tells you that. If that's how you're training program goes. You're just going in and exercising because there's no actual progression to anything that you're doing.
Yeah, and I will mention that this was many years ago, and I think that Oshkosh CrossFit rebranded to a different style.
Yeah,
and I imagine that their training does not necessarily look the same way that it did the 8+ potential years ago that when I was there.
That's all very true, but like I still hear stories of CrossFits like that.
Yeah,
like I would have been under the impression that like eventually the wheat would separate from the chaff and the bad CrossFits would close, but like because the training isn't actually what a lot of people go to a CrossFit for. These CrossFits that are just more like exercise day in and day out can stay afloat, and they still exist, and like they get good reviews because they still have like good communities and whatever else, right? Because it's not always about like the actual training. Sometimes it's just like a place to go and fucking be social, and that's cool too.
Yeah.
Right? But that's also like one of the big problems with CrossFit, in that there's like you don't know what you're getting when you are going to a CrossFit. It's just a name.
Yeah. Yep. Very true. So what about you? What do you remember?
I think the biggest problem is people just being too focused on weights, ego lifting, right? And because they're too focused on weights, they don't actually progress like that they should, right? Yeah. And like I'll say that this is even something that's it plagues everybody at some point. It's just like a nature of being a beginner into intermediate as someone who like does training, right? Or even does exercise.
Yeah.
It's like you just get caught up in like wanting to do hard shit or wanting to show off. Like you don't want to do the light weights, even though maybe you'd get a better stimulus out of the light weights because it doesn't look as cool, right? But that's like, you're not at the fucking gym to show off. That's not the time to show off, right?
I remember when we did the Juggernaut method, like the 1.0. I know that there's a new Juggernaut. I did that for a bit. It's not quite the way that it is, but it was the first time that I had been introduced to sort of the concept of like wave progression.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all like dummy light. It was all super light. I remember us doing their like 15s, like rounds of 15 reps with like reverse grip, like shrugs, and that was when we did a bunch of grip stuff. Remember when we would do like the deadlift things where you would like stand up and hold the bar and then just like kind of let it loosen out to your fingertips and then squeeze back closed.
Wow. It's funny. Sometimes I forget how much I've forgotten.
I will say that my forearms felt huge when we were doing those trainings. It makes me miss grip training a little bit, but only a little bit. But I felt like we got great results doing that training. Uh-huh. And it was so funny because we're in a college gym, and talking about ego lifting. Uh-huh. That's pretty much all that was happening.
And I just think about Rappy Magoo, the guy with all the necklaces. Yeah. That would just like the whitest dude that would just rap as loud as he could and swing around these like 60-pound dumbbells that he had no business even picking up.
I remember him. And we're just there doing, and this isn't to say that we didn't ego lift 100%. There was
it definitely happens to everybody.
But it was just funny that it should lend itself to how hard it is to get out of this like ego lifting thing. Is that we did that style training. We went in and did that Juggernaut style training, got gains from it, and then we're like, yeah, finally, we're done lifting this light shit. Time to go back and do some real lifting. And it was like, how silly that it was successful and like recuperative in some ways, if I'm remembering correctly. Because I think I was dealing with shoulder shit at the time, which was one of my main inspirations in trying to lift lighter. Man, dealing with shoulder shit. Some stuff never changes.
Yeah, I mean, that's that same thinking that's like, why our blocks are built the way they are, right? And that's like the first 4 weeks, like nothing, this last block we've just started, like nothing was very heavy the first 4 weeks. We did do like some intensification to it by making it an eccentric and having to control it for a long time down. But like that's something like I'm just continuing to realize more and more is that like you probably don't need to train that heavy.
No. I think that it's funny that you mentioned that because So next week Friday is the Arnold Classic, and they'll have like a bunch of stuff going on. But I've been specifically following lightly a little bit the strongman portion of it, and it is like a stacked deck because you have not only do you have Martins Licis coming back from being off for a number of years due to injury or just recovery, but you have Hafthor Bjornsson coming back out of retirement too.
Didn't know that.
And then you have Tom Stoltman, who is a multi-time winner, and you have Mitchell Hooper, who is the current world's strongest man. So you have super stacked like group of very competitive guys, just and who are all very strong. And
they've all been the champion.
Yes. And two of them are like lineal champions, right? So two of them never lost a world's strongest man or an Arnold because they left after they won, which is kind of crazy. I've been following a lot of Martins Licis did this big like strength unknown or and it's yeah, and it's I watched the sumo one that he did and I really liked that one. And it kind of inspired more sumo stuff to come into my YouTube, and super interesting stuff. And he was talking about how he felt like he needed to catch up when he was like in his early 20s leading up to that World's Strongest Man win. And he was deadlifting because he was like, oh, I'm a weak deadlifter. I need to catch up to all these super strong deadlifters. And he was doing some form of deadlift like 4 to 5 times a week. And he was on top of doing like all this other stuff. And he was like saying that everybody always considered him to be like a really smart lifter and very like recovery focused. But it was like every like cup that he was putting into the bucket of recovery, he was like pulling out like 4. And he ended up having like crazy hip problems, and he still has shoulder problems. And then now coming back in, his biggest thing has been he really only lifts heavy, like really heavy, like once a month. And that he does a ton of like jujitsu work and sort of stuff that's just kind of like moving.
More rotational.
And he's had to totally change how he even does certain lifts because he's had to like relearn how to do them with compromised joints, basically. Like I think his shoulder's like totally fucked.
Find a more perfect position.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's not less strong, which is crazy. Like coming into it, like I mean, he's still pulling 900 plus pound deadlifts and stuff. It's like crazy, and it's just really interesting hearing you mention about that side of things, like not always having to lift super fucking heavy. And then immediately just today I'm listening to an interview with Martins Licis where he says basically the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's a fucking trap. It's a trap. I fell into it for years. I mean, again, everybody does. And if you don't have like a good seasoned mentor to tell you not to do that shit, like, I mean, even we probably both have read that like a million fucking times, but you don't really take it seriously until you have to, right? And then like something happens, you get an injury, whatever, and then you have to train light for a while and you're like, oh shit, it actually didn't matter. In fact, maybe I'm in a better place than where I initially got injured because I spent that time dialing it fucking back. And it's just something that has happened to me consistently, and I'm sure you've noticed it's happened to you, or we're talking about it with Juggernaut, right? Yeah. And it's just like some people never pick up that pattern. Like it happens to them, but they don't ever like actually think about it and critically analyze what's happening. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest evolutions of our program at the gym, I'd say, over the years, is like I definitely pushed you all harder like 3-4 years ago, definitely before I had kids, and realized, oh shit, people have real lives sometimes. But yeah, I've definitely like pulled back. Like year over year, I'd say things have gotten easier, but they haven't gotten like it's only gotten better. The program's only gotten better.
Yeah, I think it's gotten better in the sense that it puts the onus on, and I think that there was a pretty marked change when there was a lot more implementation of like rep ranges and reps in reserve, sort of like that mentality. It's like you put the onus on the person lifting, the person doing the training, to adjust the difficulty. Because at the end of the day, you can't like make them work harder if they don't want to.
Yeah.
You know, and it's going to be as hard as they want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
which can be a double-edged sword, right? Because you can probably go harder than you should, but I feel like it has some level of self-control in there.
Yeah, and like it's one of those things that it's an idea that you have to utilize for a while and chew on it to really understand it, because like even you and I coming into these ideas of like autoregulation, which is just like, you know, changing your weights to make your effort that day feel like a 7 out of 10 versus just like always going with what's written.
Mm.
Like it is hard to not like just follow what's on the paper, right? Because it doesn't take as much thought, it doesn't take as much intention, right? But also if you are having a bad day and your ego tends to creep into your lifting, then you're very, very unlikely to actually remove that weight from the bar if you are having a bad day.
Yeah.
And then you just end up digging yourself deeper into that hole. So like one of the things I've actually done over the years is underestimate how much people can do, so that I'm more effectively meeting people who aren't coming in fully recovered.
Yeah.
And I think because you can get more out of training a little bit too light than a little bit too heavy, that's what's really helped push the program along and like keep people progressing longer.
Yeah, I think you hit it. I think that's so true.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I feel like there's times where I'm coming in and I'm definitely doing less than what's written on there, but it's still like a learning process for me too, you know, because like I don't always know perfectly my body every time I come in. This is still like a skill that I'm training for myself, that I don't know if it's appropriate sometimes for me to take the 30 pounds off. Is this going to compromise me next week in my lift? I don't know. All I know is that shit feels heavy that morning or that evening, and so I'm going to adjust.
And that's like the right move, right? It's just like it's better to train a little bit too light. You'll get more out of it.
Yeah. So, I think that was a good answer. Now, I'll let you start with this one. Back to the question. So, what is the common mistake or movement position or thing that you tend to keep finding yourself falling into when you're training?
Ooh. I actually think recently it's probably been, I say all this shit, and now I'm going to give you this answer. I think that, like, what I could probably be doing is training a little bit harder.
Okay.
And, it's hard because, like, I definitely could, but also, like, right now, the gym results aren't like my biggest priority in life. So maybe that's a bad answer, right? And that's kind of like why I don't push myself as hard as I fucking could on like a week that's 9 RPE, right?
Yeah.
Like I definitely could have gone a little bit heavier on my squats, but also like it's better to train a little bit too light and too heavy.
Yeah.
But like I feel like if you don't train hard for a while, you kind of lose that edge, right? Sometimes you got to cut your teeth a little bit on something heavy.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I think it's like a psychological thing.
So there's definitely this balance to like you can't just always train light, right?
Yeah.
We talk all that stuff, but you can't always train light because then there's no progressive overload to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you see this consistent wave in the program of like 6 and 7 and 8 RPE, 9 RPE until we get to that point that we need to drop it back a little bit and then continue forward because that's where the progressive overload comes in, right? But it's all... there's a plan to all of it.
I think this bakes back into the conversation that we had about not always having like a satisfying answer or even like necessarily a good answer. It's like always it's just like the nature of the beast with this stuff is that you create this like generalized sort of feeling an answer and this observation and this sort of addressment to this observation, but then it's always like, but but
that's
there's
just like
these
science,
exceptions.
right?
Yeah,
that's just science.
There's exceptions. There's changing what's happening. And it's funny that you had that answer because I have like a semi-similar, which I changed from when you were initially talking about the idea of people chasing perfection too much. And then they tend to, instead of like experimenting with their lifts and kind of finding where it's not feeling good in an avenue to find where it does feel good. And I feel like I'm in a position where sometimes I try to change things too much. I'm constantly adjusting things so that I'm never really feeling like I'm getting a lot of repetitions in a position that I know is good. I'm at this point where I feel like I do have a knowledge of how my body moves and what position I need to be in when I do my movements. And and one of the main reasons that every once in a while my movements feel bad isn't because I haven't found the perfect position yet. It's because I haven't hit enough repetitions in good positions. And so I don't have that like muscle memory of just like coming into it. I'm not doing my 1000th squat with that same form where I'm stepping in, I'm locked in. I know exactly how many steps back I need to take, exactly how I need to shift my feet. I'm like locked into that floor and I'm moving my hips in the same way every time and I'm just hitting it. And I think I'm always trying to do different things, and I think it's almost detrimental at this point now in my lifting career. And that and it's something I've been working on with my deadlift specifically, in being like same position, same feeling, feet same width apart, bar from the same spot over my laces or over my socks rather, kind of that same position, always trying to think about locking in that same position, even if sometimes I feel like it's not like great. Sometimes I feel like maybe I could get my hips like lower. Maybe if I could I'm just like chasing that feeling of like the same, because I'm just trying to get the same position, so that when I eventually, if I do need to adjust something, I don't feel like it's cascading into all these other things too.
I definitely had a phase like that for years. I think I've just recently kind of gotten out of that phase, and I think it's a similar vein to you, where like I was getting plagued by some overuse injuries. So out of frustration, I was trying to find different angles, different positions that my body might like more, but then simultaneously, I was never training light enough to really give myself that opportunity to experience different positions without a lot of stress. Because as soon as those weights start to get too heavy, then you're always going to go to the places that you feel comfortable, even if you're in a position that's new, right?
Yeah.
So you might be using a relatively new position, but not really taking advantage of it because you're trying to use this position in the way that you used your previous position, right? And
yeah.
It's, you just haven't gotten that familiarity, like you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get frustrated with that, so you try to do the same thing for a while, but then because you're focused on the actual position and not actually how you're feeling it as much, then, it'll be fine, and you'll get the practice there, but maybe you don't actually build the connection that you were looking for by doing it all the time, because it was more about the way it looks. And it's something that, like, I was kind of chasing my tail on for probably like 3-4 years, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, I can remember from when I started the gym up until probably a couple years ago when I started training a little bit lighter because I had kids.
Yeah.
So, and like, I feel like I'm probably just like the step ahead of you at this point, right? Where it's like, now I don't even think about that shit so much. It's like, how do I feel? Like, a lot of times when I bench press, especially at my heavier weights, I close my eyes. I don't even think about it. Like, it's just like what I want to do, because I can just like feel all my connections. I can just feel where my body needs to be, and I can just go.
Yeah.
And I won't say that my bench press looks the same every time, because that's not really what it's about for me anymore. Like, it's like maybe something a little bit different is actually better for me on a given day and will give me a little bit more. And it's more about like taking those warm-ups to figure out what that position might be on that given day.
Almost chasing like a sort of like a naturalistic
sort of. Kind of.
We even talked about this a little bit with like the coiling stuff, and even just like moving explosively tends to be moving naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of doing these movements in such a way where you're kind of thinking about moving the bar as opposed to moving yourself. And that's definitely a thought that I had just this last week about like with squats. It's like, instead of trying to obsess over where the bar needs to be, like, my bar path, like all this stuff, just squat it. Just like I know how to squat. I know how to get down. Is it going to sometimes look like that bar might be like a little bit forward where I should be like, I'm, if I could just get it back a little bit, I'd get so much more power. But that might not be the case. That might just be where it needs to be for me.
Yeah.
To generate the power that I need to generate. And this also ties into the conversation that we had about effort versus output. Is that I'm not chasing a career in powerlifting where I need to hyper focus on this like perfect position in order to eke out a little bit more poundage. I'm in there to just be the strongest person that I can be in my everyday life.
Yeah, it's just a hobby, y'all.
Yeah.
It's a cool hobby, but it's a hobby.
Yeah.
So don't take it too seriously. Have fun with it. But like to that point too, that's definitely a realization I've made over the last few years. It's like it's not always about the poundage anymore because I'm not like training for some fake competition in my head, right?
Yeah.
And I would even say that like there's been less of a focus for the intermediate program for us on strength, and it's more about building these other athletic qualities, building up these other movements, like other things I would like to test down the line, right?
Yeah.
So like, not to get too tangential here, but like one thing I'm thinking in terms of like when I inevitably split the percentage program into like an intermediate and a more advanced program,
Yeah.
is like the intermediate program is probably going to look a little bit more like, the typical Wendler 531, where it's like similar to the setup that we have now, but maybe a little bit more watered down so that people who are still relatively like just coming off of that base program, right, they can take a little bit more advantage of something like that.
Yeah.
They don't need things so specific as I necessarily have them right now in the percentage program. And then those people that are on that intermediate program at that point, they'll test their 1 rep maxes like we're doing, and that's cool because that's like a really easy number that we can continue to see to move and like use as essentially a proxy for how everything else is going.
Yeah.
But like once we get to like this third advanced program, I think that it's going to be more like, let's test jumps.
Yeah.
Let's test what we can do with some of these things like the landmine stuff, right?
Yeah.
Let's kind of like fuck around and find out on some of this shit.
Yeah, I really like the idea, and we played around with it a couple times, just like trying to do a bit more weightlifting stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the summer.
Yeah, I love those movements. I always have, even since we were in college. The things that, and I do think is part of that loop because I tend to be good at them. So you like the things that you're good
we've
at.
put so much practice into it at this point,
and
right?
We were doing so many, and I really do feel like when I'm like doing my pulls and stuff, it's just repetition.
Yes.
That has gotten me to be as good with the pull as I am.
Well, looping back to the beginning of this conversation, right? This is all about experience, right? And I don't say this so much anymore because we don't do them as often. But when I would teach cleans at the gym for years, I'd say, you're gonna suck at this for like 2 years, and then you might start to feel like you have it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's very normal. And people would always hate to hear that because it's like frustrating. There are several people at the gym that got really frustrated trying to learn cleans and things like that because it doesn't feel very natural. But it doesn't feel natural because it's not like anything else you ever did.
Yeah.
Right? You've never tried to clean a barbell.
And
right?
I will say that when you do get it, it feels so natural.
Yeah, it does. It actually does.
Like it like when you do that full like 3-point extension in your clean, it just, I don't know, it just feels like what I need to do, the only thing I could do to move that bar from hips to shoulders, and it would be silly to do any other way. And then you realize that you've probably been moving like this for your whole life to move certain things. Like anytime you've tried to grab some, like a bag of dog food from the floor up to your shoulder, you've done some form of this 3-point extension, and you just didn't even realize you were doing it. And you're just getting in your own fucking head with all these movements with the bar, and you just need to do it enough until like it just starts to click.
Yep. It's experience.
Yep.
Time and practice. I say it all the fucking time in the gym. People are probably sick of hearing it.
Well, that's like, we didn't record it, but it's like the simplicity of it is, just train right, rest right, and eat right, and it's just figuring out what right is for all of those.
That's the magic.
But it's
right?
but it's like it's as simple as that. But simple doesn't mean easy, and I think that's the thing.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe.
Yeah, I like that.
Leave a comment if you've got something that you want to say. We're always, there's not too many of you yet, so like you'll get a response probably.
Bye-bye.